You don't need the.
I'm doing this my way.
He a legend, he a legend, he a legend. He a legend, he a legend, he a
Fucking
legend.
on it though. Then
He
you
a
can't work
legend.
it up later.
Welcome to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league of items. Welcome to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league of items.
What's up, everybody? It's Pikel with League of Items, and in today's video, we're going to take a look at the matchups for Week 2, specifically Team Liquid against Cloud9. There's been a lot of chatter surrounding Cloud9. I think there's a lot of good information out there regarding their strategies. I think that there's also a lot of bad information or misinformation, and I think the one problem that we're going to run into is comparing Cloud9's strategy to FlyQuest's strategy, because they use some similar components, but they work in a fundamentally different way. Because the way that I look at Cloud9 is that they're saying that enchanters and the items that enchanters use are broken. FlyQuest is saying yes, but also the smite mechanic, or not the smite mechanic, the comeback mechanic through the bounty system is equally overpowered. I think that the bounty system is less likely to be overpowered. The one thing that you could think about is that in order for the bounty system to work the way that these teams want it to, they need to get the item efficiency out of those items, and then they also need to be able to get some of those bounties. And it seems a lot more unfair in like the solo queue examples where a team is actually winning and then they also get the bounties. But in a professional League of Legends game, it's much less common for the winning team to also be playing Smite top. And we've seen in a lot of these games, FlyQuest has been at a disadvantage throughout the game. So I guess another thing to throw into that is that even though they've been losing at different portions in these games, or specifically in their game against CLG, even though they felt like they were winning super hard, the goal difference wasn't that different. But then in reality, the items kind of made the gold advantage they had much more impactful. The difference with Cloud9, I think, is that their strategy doesn't depend on the top lane component of this, and I think that this is in the infancy stage. Like, I think that the itemization pathways that you can go into with enchanter supports, enchanter supports, enchanter solo laners, it all makes sense in theory. In practice, it's much more difficult to pull off, and there will be counters to the playstyle where you're attacking those champions, because a lot of these champions are just squishier in general. We saw in the Cloud9 against Evil Geniuses match, they started to play around like kill the Soraka. It was too little, too late. But we're going to talk more about that at a later portion of the video. So I'm on Odds Portal for all the games for Week 2. And we're just going to go through each game the way that I think it's going to play out. So first up, we have Evil Geniuses against Dignitas. Dignitas has had a pretty good start to the season. People are happy about their roster and how they've kind of been playing. Fake God against Impact. I think that Fake God is good enough to go even in lane. River against Inspired. People are very impressed by River. I think that we haven't seen a great carry performance out of River yet, where he really took over the game on his own. I think it's been more of a team effort, which is a good thing for Dignitas. Blue has looked good but not great. Neo and Biofrost are pretty good. The thing that stands out for Dignitas for me is that River and Biofrost have done a good job moving around the map together, getting deep warding, which is something that Biofrost has always been good at. He's always been a pretty good player. Not a great player, but he's been a pretty good player. So the question is, how is that going to impact a team like Evil Geniuses? And I think that it is going to be difficult for Dignitas to get a draft that will give them early game tempo and the advantage in general, with the ability to to force plays around the map. It's going to be difficult for them to do that and also scale with Evil Geniuses, because I think that Danny will most likely be on a hyper carry. Jojo Pyun has been playing things like the Rise. So I'm a little bit afraid that Dignitas is going to go for some very aggressive composition, and then Evil Geniuses has multiple ways to win the game. And I obviously think the more talented team at plus 185, that is an interesting number for Dignitas, but I think that I'm probably just still going to be on Evil Geniuses. That's just my default position this year. 100 Thieves against Immortals. This isn't the best upset spot. I think that next week we're going to get upset spots for Immortals. I think that they're a horrible team. I hate the way that their roster is constructed. I think that Wild Turtle is not good enough anymore. I think that Revenge is not a very good top laner. And, of course, I mean relative to the other top laners in the league. Revenge is league average. But league average is not something you should build around. So unless they start drafting differently and putting Revenge into positions to carry the game on his own, they're just going to be a mediocre at best team. And right now they're not even mediocre. So I think 100 Thieves is obviously the choice there. Team Liquid against Cloud9, we'll talk about this more later on. But this is a good underdog spot for Team Liquid. Going into the season, if you posted this line before the first two games, Team Liquid would have been the favorite. So you're getting a little bit of additional value on Team Liquid. Golden Guardians against CLG. I think this is a good spot for CLG. Contracts was horrible last week, and I don't think he's that bad of a player. Licorice against Jenkins, both pretty good players. Licorice has been more successful at the LCS level, but Jenkins is he's a difference maker when he gets his best champions. The Kennen game, I think, showed how good he is at the champion, because he had an advantage in lane while his team was getting destroyed because Contracts kind of misplayed. I think that it's very unlikely we get another 8 death game out of Contracts. I think that he is probably better than Pridestalker. Pridestalker will play the more aggressive side of the matchup, which will allow Contracts to kind of settle down a little bit. He's been probably feeling the pressure and feeling like he needs to create action around the map. Hopefully after a week of reviewing, the team has a more solid plan going into their drafts. And like, if you want to play the Diana Yasuo again, I think it's a great idea, but you got to be a little smarter with the first play of the game that you're trying to make, because I think that's what really derailed everything. They kind of played their early game slow. Then it was Diana Yasuo try for the mid gank. The gank failed. Diana had to Boulder Flash, and everything just kind of got out of control from that point. In the mid lane, a Blaze Olive against Palafox. They're pretty similar players in terms of skill level. I'm fine with both sides. I think that Palafox is probably the more likely to hard carry a game. And then in the bot lane, we have Luger and Poom against Lost and Ale. I kind of prefer the idea of Luger to Lost. I don't think that we've seen a ton of great hard carry performances out of Lost throughout his career. And I think that Luger still has that upside where, just from a champion pool perspective of what's natural for them to play, you're going to get some advantages from that in the draft. So I think that is the side that I definitely prefer, which is a good underdog spot. I'm surprised that the line is like that, honestly. Next up, TSM and FlyQuest. Sorry. TSM against FlyQuest. I think that this is a spot to pick TSM because they didn't look as good as they should either. I think that from a talent perspective, they are the more talented team. I think that Huni is still better than Kumo. I don't 100% trust TSM's ability to draft. But I think after the way that this first week went, I think they'll play Spica on more hard carry champions. And they'll have a better chance to attack the Smite top laner. I think it would be a mistake to kind of ban it out, probably, because there are multiple champions that can do it. I think that Spica is better than Jose Diodo. I think that Kaiduo and Takui have both shown some good, some bad between lock-in and the first week. Johnson and Aframu against Tactical and Shen Yi. I think that Tactical and Shen Yi will be they will be insanely good when they're winning, and they'll be insanely bad when they're losing. And it has somewhat to do with their playstyle, their aggressiveness, and the champions that they play. If you're Shenyi and you're playing engaged supports, when it goes bad, it's going to go very bad. That's just how it happens in League of Legends. So that's basically it. I like the TSM side. I think that you can very easily imagine a scenario where in week 1, FlyQuest loses both Smite top games, TSM won both of their games, or at least very competitive in both games, and TSM would be a much bigger favorite in this spot. So I think that's definitely the way to go. Like I said before, Cloud9 against Immortals, you're taking Cloud9. If this number gets a little bit higher, maybe you're just like, screw it, like throw $20 on it and just kind of ride it out until Immortals wins a game. But there will be better upset spots in the future. TSM against Golden Guardians. Again, TSM is just a more talented team. I'm not going to bet against TSM because of their week 1 performance. I believe in the players they have. I thought we saw some good things out of Kaido, and the team didn't work right because Spica was on Poppy. And I know that Poppy is an okay pick for certain teams in certain drafts. I don't think that Poppy is the type of champion Spica should be playing. Evil Geniuses against 100 Thieves. I love Evil Geniuses in the underdog spot here. That's really the mentality that I have. I think that they're the more talented team long term. I like the upside of their players. They didn't look great in week 1, but the greatness is there. So I want to bet on that potential greatness that I believe is there. Team Liquid against FlyQuest. I think that Team Liquid is going to be able to deal with FlyQuest for the same reason that I think Team Liquid is going to be able to deal with C9. And then Dig against CLG. I think it's this is a spot where you kind of feel obligated to play CLG at plus 150. I don't think that CLG will be as consistent as Dignitas, but all it takes is one game. And you probably don't want to bet the CLG at 150. What you should do is wait for the first day to happen. If CLG loses, then bet on them to beat Dignitas because the number should inflate a little bit. So that's that. Now let's talk about Cloud9 and Team Liquid. Cloud9 and Team Liquid. So we haven't seen Cloud9 play anything outside of the Enchanter supports, which isn't really a huge problem. The questions that I have for C9 is more like, where else are they willing to play Enchanters to get access to those types of items? Because it's really not about playing an Enchanter in the mid lane. It's about giving an Enchanter the economy to build Moonstone Renewer, Redemption, Ardent Censor, empowering the other champions on their team, and playing that way. I think one underrated aspect of this is the AD carry. So if you if you think that Cloud9 will opt in to an Enchanter, I don't really care which Enchanter. I don't really care which Enchanter it is. If they're going to play this high economy game, you need to try to get them onto champions that cannot take advantage of that high economy. So, Aphelios, for example, is a great champion to give buffs. So if I'm Team Liquid, maybe I ban out. Maybe I try to ban out AD carry, and just really restrict that pool. So if I'm Team Liquid, I think that they have side selection, right? So let's see that. Side selection. I'm not sure if they have side selection or not. So here we had side selection TSM. So it should be the first team that's listed every time. So Team Liquid should have side selection. I don't work with Team Liquid. I don't know what their plan is. But my plan, if I was Team Liquid, would be to pick blue side so that I can restrict the AD carry choices that are out there. Before we go deeper into the game, let's talk about lane by lane. So Summit against Bwipo. I do think that Summit is probably better than Bwipo. If we were rating them both out of 100, I think that Summit's rating out of 100 would be higher. I don't think that they are in different classes. I don't think that Summit is a good player and Bwipo is a mediocre player. I think they're both good top laners. I think they're both good enough to be on a team. I think they're both good enough to be an integral part of a team that goes to Worlds. Bwipo has a fantastic champion pool, understands the game deeply, can communicate what he thinks about the game very well, like on stage and also with his teammates. So I don't think that Bwipo will be outmatched by Summit. I think it's possible that the game can go sideways, but I don't think that Team Liquid... I don't think it's like only a talent thing between these two teams. Like I think that's a relatively close one. Blabber against Santorin. I think that Blabber is a much better player than Santorin. Again, there are drafts that can help Santorin keep it close, but I don't believe in Santorin long term. I think that that's really going to be one of the pain points for Team Liquid throughout this year. Then in the mid lane we have Fudge against Bjergsen. This one's tough. I think that Bjergsen is obviously a very solid mid laner, and his champion pool can probably easily take on some of these enchanters, enchantresses. I wouldn't be shocked if he is able to do that very soon. I don't know if they feel like they need to do it, but I know that Bjergsen would be able to do it. They're not mechanically intense champions. It's just about the concept, the economy, and being able to utilize those items in the late game for your hard carry. Then we have Hansama and Isla against Berserker and Winsome. I think that this is where I think that Cloud9 might find themselves kind of over indexing into this strategy. I don't know what the math says behind it, but I think that you shouldn't be building multiple Moonstone Renewers on your team. I think that Moonstone Renewer is a little overrated. I think that Ardent Censer is better from like a pure numbers perspective. The ceiling of that item, if you have multiple champions on your team that you can buff up, it's just better from a pure gold standpoint. Because all these base stats have gold values, so when you're giving the buff to multiple players on your team, you get that gold value multiple times. That's one of the reasons why Lux is such a great champion for this type of playstyle specifically. I don't know if Fudge went in that direction, like built Lux for like Ardent Censer, but somebody's going to do it, and it's very good from a theory perspective. But you need to build your team the right way. Ultimately, that's what it comes down to, and that's one of the problems that Cloud9 might run into. Like I said before, is that if they don't have enough natural damage on a couple of their champions, and they just get like one or two enchanters into their team, thinking that, oh, we got one or two enchanters, we picked Jhin, we picked Renekton. I mean, they probably won't pick Renekton, but they picked one or two champions that didn't scale really well. That is a potential downfall for this type of team composition that I expect other teams who try to emulate Cloud9 in the future, they will make that mistake. The question for Cloud9 is, have they already anticipated that mistake? Do they understand this strategy deep enough to not fall into that pitfall? Fall into that pitfall. I don't know which one of those is right. But that's one potential problem where Cloud9 could beat themselves. So with Team Liquid, I think, like I said before, you have side selection. So if you want to beat Cloud9, pick blue. Get rid of as many 80 carries as possible so that the items that they build are less effective. So you probably just want to ban If Team Liquid isn't going to play the strategy themselves, they should probably ban Aphelios, pick Jinx, and then see how Cloud9 reacts. That's really the starting point, and then once you see what they're building, you can continuously pivot. The other things that Team Liquid needs to do are keep in mind the economy aspect of League of Legends. So if you're playing against Cloud9, you cannot draft an early game team composition unless you are willing to play hyper aggro and just basically flip that coin during the draft, because that's really what you're doing. You need to beat them before their timer before the timer on the game, because if Cloud9 is using their gold more efficiently, they're going to outscale an early game team composition really hard. The next thing that you need to do to beat Cloud9 is going to be attacking the champions that are building the economy items, because that's really the easiest way to slow down that type of team composition and to reduce the amount of effective gold in team fights, is to get those items off the map. The other solution is just eliminating one of their champions, which is possible. Like, if you can blow up the Aphelios before he gets shielding and everything, then yes, that's one way to do it. But you can't really play around that, because that requires Berserker to play poorly. Like, he needs to be out of position, not expect... be out of position, don't have flash, don't have cleanse, and make a mistake. And you can't really depend on the enemy team to make a mistake. You should build things into your team composition that allows you to be successful by executing your own strategy that doesn't depend on the enemy team. So Hans Sama is definitely capable of playing a hyper carry against some kind of utility AD carry that Cloud9 would have to kind of pivot into. They could always go for like a Xayah or something like that. Let's see what else we know about Berserker. It's going to come down to a lot of macro stuff with Team Liquid, because the other thing that you can do is just pick a team composition that's going to be very strong around the first couple of dragons, and then constantly go after dragons, basically. Do we have more champions? So we could see like an Ezreal. Ezreal's okay. You want champions that can use the on-hit stuff very well. Kai'Sa against Jinx. Is Kai'Sa's not a counter to Jinx. So we could see Kai'Sa. We could see Xayah. Tristana is actually a really good champion with on-hit buffs because of the attack speed. So that might be another champion. Like, once you go like Aphelios, Jinx, you could go Kog'Maw, but I don't think you really want to right now. That's interesting. So that's the main way I see Team Liquid winning, is by utilizing some of that. It's also possible that Cloud9, and like, I think the important thing, obviously, the reason why we would discuss something like Cloud9 and Team Liquid, how do they beat Cloud9, is because of the strategy that Cloud9 is using right now. As time goes on, it'll be important to see if Cloud9 always opts into that as their go-to strategy, their default strategy, which is the correct thing to do. Unless it's like a new patch or something. If you believe that you have this read on the meta, you should always draft the same way until another team proves that there are holes in your drafting strategy and your item composition. Like, you can make that call during a draft, but going into the draft, you need to say, I think that this champion with this item, with this champion with these items, is the best combination in the game. How do I build my team composition around that combination? And if you're right, you'll have an advantage. If you're wrong, then you might have a slight disadvantage, in the sense that you think that you have an edge when you don't, but that's kind of getting too deep into it. It's not really that significant. But yeah, limit the scaling champions that the other team's going to have access to, like Gwen, Aphelios, Jinx, Camille. Olaf is actually like a very interesting wrinkle in this whole Cloud9 strategy, because you would anticipate a champion that falls off very hard to be something they stay away from. But since you have so much additional gold coming from these enchanters and buffing up a champion like Olaf, it might just make... It's just an added benefit. Like, he is the bridge to the late game, but if they start snowballing, they could really destroy you. Because once those items come online, they're not like weak items when you buy them. They're instantly very impactful. But that's it. I think I need to do a little bit more digging into the items again. I haven't looked through all the items. I found a JSON file, with all the information in it. I'm going to have one of my friends take a look at it, and we're going to go through some of the data and update my gold efficiency numbers. And then once I understand those numbers a little bit better, I'll be able to make a video, a more in-depth video about that specifically. But until then, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.